One phrase appeared repeatedly. She stayed to remember. I stayed to forget. She didn't remember writing it, but her hand ached like she had. Then came the day her husband found her standing in front of the attic. The door wide open, the ladder fully extended. "Mia?" he asked. She didn't turn. She didn't blink. She whispered, "Did you hear it?" "Hear what?" "The voice." It said, "Closer." He climbed up slowly. She didn't follow. When he reached the top, the attic was empty. No light, no window, just darkness. And when he turned back, she was gone. They found her 2 hours later, downstairs, sitting in the parlor, hands folded in her lap, eyes blank. She looked up slowly when he entered the room, smiled, but not like she used to, like someone remembering a face they hadn't worn in years. "Who are you?" he whispered. Her smile widened. "I live here." He backed away, but she didn't follow. She just stared at the fireplace, as if something behind the flames was whispering to her, or through her. The next morning, she didn't remember any of it. She said she must have sleepwalked, said he must have dreamed it. He believed her, mostly. But that night, he slept with the hallway light on, and the attic door, again, was open. In the listing photos, the attic window was shut. But anyone driving down Larkspur Lane today would see it differently. That round, lidded eye always seems to be slightly open, a sliver of glass, a shape behind it. Sometimes it's a woman, other times, a child. Occasionally, a reflection. Mouth slightly open, head tilted, listening. Those who visited say the house feels too still, like it's holding something back. Some say they feel watched from the mirrors. Others say they hear breathing behind the walls. But they all say the same thing when they leave, that they can't quite remember what the attic looked like, or if it was ever really there, only that something above the ceiling felt warm, too warm, as though the house were alive and waiting. Can you feel it now? That quiet breath on the back of your neck, asking to be remembered? Tell us below. What do you think still lingers in the attic? Long before it had a number or a name, the house on Larkspur Lane had a memory. It did not begin with Clara Marin or with Miriam. It began before walls, before plaster, before the attic window was ever cut into the gable like an open wound. It began with listening, because the land beneath the house had always heard things. Not in the way of superstition, but in the quiet, deeper sense, a listening that turns long enough into invitation. Before the Marin family settled, before deeds and foundations, the townsfolk whispered about that stretch of wooded hill. They said animals avoided it, that snow refused to settle evenly across it, that the wind passed through the trees there with a sound too close to breath. In 1842, a girl named Althea Bauer was found wandering that land barefoot and smiling, her mouth full of dirt, her journal filled with words she had never been taught. She lived only 6 more days. The coroner said she had drowned from the inside out. There was no water in her lungs, only fog. The house was built in 1861, commissioned by the Hollinsworth family. The father, Edgar, was a preacher with interests in what he called structural sanctity, the belief that a house could be holy by geometry alone. He designed the attic first, a circle at the top, a mouth to the sky. The rest of the home spiraled downward from it, carefully measured, laid with proportions borrowed from obscure religious texts and misremembered dreams. Edgar's journals reveal a disturbing evolution. His sermons stopped referencing God. He began preaching about echoes, about memory as flesh. He died in that attic, quietly, sitting up. His wife sealed it shut, but the door reopened over and over again, each time wider. By 1910, 3 families had passed through the house. Each stayed no longer than 6 years. Each recorded the same things. Objects appearing where they didn't belong. Dreams of children singing. A circular stain that bled through the attic floorboards. no matter how many times it was scrubbed. A local historian once referred to it as residual haunting, but others had a different name. In a letter dated 1914, a woman named Gertrude Kinney described it plainly. It does not haunt, it holds. Clara Marin was born in the house, the last in a long, fraying line. She was 5 when her brother vanished. The story told in town was that he ran into the woods chasing a red kite and was never seen again. But in her final years, Clara told a different version. She said the attic had grown tired of waiting, that the voice inside it had learned to speak like her brother, that it called her name through the mirror, that she did not answer, but he did, and he never came back down. By the time Miriam arrived, sent for a summer her mother wanted to forget, the house had already grown fluent in the family's grief. It knew the timbre of silence, the particular way Marin women paused before speaking. It knew how to stretch dreams just long enough to make them feel realer than memory. The attic door never opened for Miriam that summer, not in the way doors usually open. But each night she dreamed of climbing stairs that had no end, of reaching a window that watched her from both sides. And when she woke, the air smelled like someone else's breath. The town forgot the house after a while. That's what small towns do. They smooth over discomfort with stories that make things simple. They said Clara died alone, old and mad. They said Miriam must have wandered off again. Her car was still in the drive, her suitcase still upstairs, but no one had seen her in months. The door was unlocked, the attic sealed. The new real estate agent described it as charmingly peculiar. Her assistant said the place felt unfinished, but not in structure, in intention, as if something was still waiting to be concluded. Those who live in the house today do not stay long. It's never a dramatic exit. They just begin forgetting things. A painting they didn't hang, a note they didn't write, a feeling that someone familiar is in the next room, though they live alone. Some start to whisper to themselves. Others stop whispering altogether. A few begin writing again. They always use the same initials. M. Marin, one woman, claimed she saw herself in the attic window before she ever moved in. Another said the house told her secrets about her childhood that no one should have known. One man claimed the attic showed him the face of a daughter he'd never had, but who spoke to him in dreams and begged him not to leave her behind. They said the walls sometimes listen too closely, that they can hear your thoughts if you sit too long in silence. That when you speak your own name in the mirror, the echo responds slightly off. Records show the attic has been renovated 6 times. Each effort fails. Contractors complain of structural shifts that don't match the plans, measurements that warp between morning and night, a ladder that folds and unfolds itself in silence. One carpenter said the wood was soft where it should be hard, like skin under floorboards. He never returned. It said the attic is no longer just at the top, that it lives in reflections, in forgotten closets, in dreams of staircases leading nowhere. That once you hear your own voice from behind a door that shouldn't be there, you've already started becoming part of it. The house remembers every name, every face, every silence. It holds on to what was said, and especially what wasn't. It's not haunted in the traditional sense. There are no chains, no screaming specters, just remnants, half-thoughts, unfinished selves. Miriam did not vanish. She was remembered too well, and when a memory lasts too long in one place and it begins to grow roots. Now when the fog curls around the edges of Larkspur Lane and the attic window opens just a fraction, listen closely. If you hear your name in the hush, don't answer, not even in thought, because once you're remembered by the house, it's already begun learning how to be you. If the house remembered you, what part would it keep? A voice? A silence? A forgotten dream? Let us know in the comments before you forget yourself. They say Silver Lake never ripples even in a storm, that it drinks sound and gives back silence. Claire didn't believe such things, not until the knocking began beneath her cabin at midnight, not until the whispering started in the reeds, calling her by name. The townsfolk said not to feed it attention, but some things once heard can't be unheard. Now she stares into the lake's glassy eye, and something ancient stares back. She came seeking peace. What she found was a truth too deep to resurface. Before we plunge any deeper, do you believe in the unseen forces lurking just out of sight? Comment below. Claire Elridge was not a woman who believed in hauntings. Her world, until recently, was one of noise, coffee-stained edits, and the tinny ring of a cell phone in perpetual demand. She had built her name as a fiction columnist in Boston, known for sharp wit and a cynical sense of realism. But grief has a way of dulling even the sharpest edge. After her sister drowned in a lake when they were children, a wound remained stitched too tightly beneath her memory. It was only after her father died in March that those stitches gave out. She needed quiet. Not the kind found in city bookstores or writers' retreats with curated silence, but a deeper, older kind. The silence of things left alone. That's how she found Silver Hollow, a village barely clinging to the New Hampshire maps, like a whispered memory someone tried to forget. And in that village, at its very edge, was a lake they simply called Silver. There was something peculiar about how it shimmered in the listings she found online. Always too still. Its glassy surface bore no blemish of wind or wildlife, just an infinite patience. The Larkin cabin, perched right at the lake's edge, was advertised with tired enthusiasm. Cozy, private, with its own dock and fireplace. Built in 1893, a perfect writer's retreat. It had been posted for 3 years without a single rental. Claire signed the lease within an hour. The drive north took 6 hours. With each mile, cell phone bars blinked out like dying stars. Roads narrowed, towns thinned. The final leg twisted through thickets of pine where the trees leaned in as though whispering to each other behind her back. When Claire reached Silver Hollow, it wasn't so much an arrival as a surrender. The village unfolded itself reluctantly. A gas station with no signage, a diner called Ellen's Table, and a church that hadn't chimed in years. No one greeted her, not at first. She stopped at the general store for groceries. The woman behind the counter wore a cardigan despite the heat and rang up her items without a word. When Claire mentioned the Larkin cabin, the woman paused mid-scan. "You're renting it?" she asked without inflection. "Yes," Claire replied. "For a month. Just looking for a quiet place to write." The woman's lips barely moved. Claire tried to lighten the mood. "It's beautiful online, looks like a postcard." The woman's fingers drummed once on the counter. "You stay indoors after dark." It wasn't advice, it was instruction. Claire blinked. "Is that local wildlife warning or—" But the woman only handed her the receipt and said nothing more. The road to the cabin was dirt, pocked with dips and patches of overgrowth. Claire's rental car protested, groaning over stones until the trees parted and she saw it. The lake, blue as a lie and twice as deep. The Larkin cabin stood about 30 feet from the shoreline, nestled in a crescent of ancient birch. Its faded paint gave it a haunted dignity, like something still standing out of stubborn memory. Inside, it smelled faintly of old pine and smoke. Dust motes floated in shafts of dying light as she stepped over the threshold. The living room was small but welcoming, a fireplace blackened with use, 2 armchairs, and a built-in bookshelf filled with tattered novels and yellowing journals. Her bedroom overlooked the lake. The dock jutted like a finger into its placid surface wrapped in morning fog. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. The sounds she expected, the creak of floorboards, distant animal calls, the soft rhythm of waves lapping the dock never came. The lake made no sound. No insects buzzed. Not even the trees whispered. She slept poorly, waking every few hours to an unnatural stillness. It was not peace. It was anticipation. On her second morning, she met Elias Brandt. She had walked to the lake's edge, coffee in hand, when she noticed the man standing barefoot on the dock next door. Thin, in his 60s perhaps, with pale skin stretched tight over long limbs. He was facing the water unmoving, lips parted as if listening to something beneath. "Good morning," Claire offered. He turned slowly, blinking as if surprised to see her. His eyes were the color of fogged glass. "You're the writer." She smiled. That obvious? You've taken the Larkin cabin. Just for a while. Needed quiet. Not sure I expected this much of it, though. Elias said nothing for a moment, then looked back toward the lake. It never gives more than it takes. Excuse me? He gestured vaguely toward the water. Silver Lake. You'll hear it at night. Try not to answer. Claire laughed awkwardly. You mean frogs? Loons? His lips curled into a half-smile, humorless. No, I don't. She didn't press him further. Later that afternoon, she explored the interior more thoroughly. The attic door was nailed shut. The basement had no light switch, only a rusted chain that didn't work. But it was the guest bedroom that puzzled her most. Beneath the bed, she found a small wooden box filled with children's toys. Wooden blocks, a single rain boot, and a plastic compass with no needle. The air in that room always felt just a degree colder than the rest. That evening, she walked along the shoreline and passed an old fisherman sitting on an upturned bucket, line cast into still water that didn't ripple. He didn't look up. As she passed, he muttered something, soft, too faint to catch. She turned, asking him to repeat it. He only shook his head as if regretting having spoken at all. That night, the knocking began. It came just past 1 a.m., a soft, deliberate rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. As though someone below her cabin was knocking upward through the floor. She sat up in bed, heart thudding, holding her breath. The knocking stopped. She checked the windows. Locked. Checked under the bed. Empty. She opened the front door and stepped into the cold dark. The lake glinting with eerie calm. No wind. No movement. When she returned inside, she found the rain boot from the guest room box sitting in front of her bedroom door. She hadn't touched it. In the morning, she visited Ellen's table for breakfast. The same woman from the general store was serving coffee. Claire hesitated before speaking. Have you ever heard knocking in the night? The woman stared. From under the cabin, Claire added, like it's coming through the floorboards. The woman turned to the cook behind the counter. She's in Larkin's. The cook, a man in his 70s, simply nodded. Claire frowned. What does that mean? The woman poured more coffee. Nothing. Just keep your lights on after sundown, and don't look in the lake if it calls your name. Claire laughed, uneasily. I didn't say it did. You will. Outside, she found a boy waiting beside her car, maybe 11 or 12, freckles, blue hoodie. He handed her a folded scrap of paper, then turned and walked quickly away. The note read, Don't listen if it knocks again. Don't go near the dock after dusk. If you hear your sister, run. Claire's hands went cold. She hadn't told anyone about her sister. Claire tries to dismiss the unease as grief echoing in solitude, but the lake is watching, and when the knocking returns the next night, it brings whispers that sound disturbingly familiar. The second night, the knocking came again, this time louder, more urgent. Claire lay in bed listening, frozen beneath the quilt, each thud vibrating faintly through the old wood beneath her mattress. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more, and then silence, so complete it rang in her ears. No wind against the windows, no creaks of old wood, just the inhuman stillness that had already begun to nest inside her. She slipped out of bed, bare feet touching cold pine. The air in the cabin felt wrong, off balance, as if something had tilted slightly on its axis. She crept toward the living room, heart tapping its own rhythm in her chest. The grandfather clock near the fireplace read 1:13 a.m., though she could have sworn hours had passed since midnight. She knelt down, pressing an ear to the floor. Silence, but just as she rose, there came a faint, wet whisper, so faint she wasn't sure if it had been real or a trick of her mind. Claire. She flinched. The sound hadn't come from outside. It had come from beneath her. She backed away, bumping into the coffee table. The box of toys from the guest room, left untouched by her, was now open on the floor. The toy compass sat in the center of the rug. Its needleless face stared blankly upward, as though waiting for something to point the way. By day, Claire threw herself into writing, trying to anchor herself to the one ritual that still felt normal. She sat by the window overlooking the lake and typed furiously into her laptop. Half thoughts, fragments of memory, and a story she couldn't quite shape. A woman haunted by whispers, a cabin that refused to sleep, a mirror that showed something beneath the surface of the water. But no matter how hard she worked, her words felt wrong. The sentences collapsed, ideas unraveled into nonsense. The more she tried to focus, the more she felt something pressing in at the edge of thought, like a shadow looming just outside her line of vision. The lake never rippled, not even when a breeze passed through the trees. That afternoon, she took a walk into town, hoping for distraction. The streets of Silver Hollow were as quiet as ever, too quiet for a town with children and working shops. At Ellen's table, only 2 tables were filled, the same cook, the same cardigan-wrapped woman. No one spoke. She took a seat by the window. After a moment, the boy who had handed her the note appeared again, this time standing by the payphone outside the gas station. He watched her through the glass. Not shy, not nervous. Warning. His face unreadable. Claire stood, meaning to approach him, but by the time she stepped outside, he was gone. She walked instead to the library, an old stone building with a rust-stained roof and ivy-covered walls. Inside, the musty air was thick with age. A single librarian sat behind the counter, a man in his 80s who looked as though he'd grown roots into the desk. "I'm staying in the Larkin cabin," she said, watching for a flicker of recognition. He looked up slowly. "I was wondering if you had any historical records on the lake or the town. Old newspapers, maybe?" The man stared at her for a long moment. Then, "Why?" "I'm a writer." He studied her, then he stood, shuffled toward the back and returned with 3 yellowing folders bound with twine. He set them down and gestured to a side table. "Don't remove them, don't photocopy. Just read." She nodded and began to sift through the brittle pages. The first folder contained local obituaries from the 1950s through 1980s. She noted a peculiar pattern. Once every 10 years, someone was reported missing from Silver Hollow. Always in July, always near the lake. 1953, Lydia Marin, age 16, last seen near the shoreline. 1963, Walter Tembley, 41, local trapper, presumed drowned. 73, Maggie Larkin, 8 years old, vanished from her bedroom during the night. Claire stared at that last name. Larkin. The folder offered no follow-up articles, no police reports. Just the one clipped announcement, and silence. As though the town preferred erasure to explanation. The second folder held news from the early 2000s. One article stood out immediately, dated July 15, 2003. Writer missing after retreat at Silver Lake. The grainy photograph was of a woman, dark, hair smiling. Her name was Danielle Everly, and according to the brief article, she had rented the Larkin cabin for a 3-week writing retreat. She was last seen walking alone near the dock at dusk. Claire leaned back in her chair, heart thudding. Danielle's name was written inside the first page of one of the journals on the cabin bookshelf. She returned the folders to the counter. The librarian gave her a long, searching look, then said softly, "If you hear it calling your name, don't answer." That night, Claire dreamt she was underwater. It wasn't drowning, not exactly. The water felt warm, almost maternal, surrounding her like a thick embrace. In the dream, she could breathe. She floated just below the surface. The sky overhead a distorted smear of silver and cloud. Faces moved around her, dozens of them, pale, watching. Some were children. One of them was her sister. "Stay," the voice in the water whispered. Claire woke in darkness, gasping, the taste of lake silt in her mouth. The knocking returned just before 2 a.m. But this time it wasn't beneath the floor. It came from the door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. She crept down the hallway. Her fingers brushed the deadbolt. She pressed her eye to the peephole. No one. But as she turned to walk away, a child's voice called faintly from the other side of the door. "Claire, it's me. I found my boot. Can I come in?" Claire froze. The voice was so familiar it made her knees buckle. It was her sister's. Not how she sounded at 10, not a childhood echo, but now, the voice she might have had if she'd lived. The door handle began to jiggle. Claire backed away, shaking. "You're not real," the voice giggled, then silence. When she opened the door at dawn, no one was there, but the toy compass sat on the doorstep, its blank face pointing toward the lake. Later that morning, Claire sat on the dock, staring into the stillness. Her reflection stared back, a perfect mirror, unblinking. She dropped a pebble into the water. No ripple. It simply vanished. She stood to go, but before she could turn away, something shifted beneath the surface. Just at the edge of her vision, a shape. Human. Floating several feet down, eyes open, watching. Claire screamed and stumbled back, but when she looked again, the lake was empty, smooth, silent. Elias appeared beside her as though conjured by the moment. "Did it show you something?" he asked calmly. There was a body. Not a body. An echo. It's choosing how to speak to you. "What is it?" she demanded. "What lives in there?" Elias looked at her. "It doesn't live. It remembers. It collects. We feed it silence, and in return, it leaves most of us alone." Claire stared at him. "Most?" He smiled sadly. "Every so often, someone hears it more clearly. Someone already broken, already listening. And then it starts knocking." She whispered, "I don't want to listen, but you already have." That evening, she left a notebook open beside the fireplace and scribbled, "If I disappear, the lake knows. Look in the basement.